So, as always with Trek, the good stuff and the bad stuff. So, we'll get to the sad news that Nichelle Nichols is now officially dead. She died only a few days ago. She lived a full life, so it's not too tragic. But of course, if you are a hardcore Trekkie, it is kind of sad seeing so many of the original cast just dying. We still have technically Captain Kirk, but it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner. So, for those completely uninitiated, essentially Nichelle played Uhura, who worked communications on the original Trek series. And the original Trek series took place in the 1960s. Now, I am a pretty big Trek person. I'm very pro Trek, but there are a lot of, unfortunately, good and bad mythologies about the original series and how good or bad it was. I would fall critically that it was mostly bad. It was not the fault of the show. They didn't really have a lot of money. NBC kept wanting to cancel it. There were just a lot of problems. And that brings us to Nichelle herself because, ironically, and again, you can verify this just looking at the series, people don't want to believe it, but it was really just a small role. And apparently, she's just a very theater person, but she liked doing track, but decided she wanted to do it anymore, and it wasn't that big a role. Again, they just didn't have a lot of money or time. It just wasn't the moneymaker it is today. So she almost resigned and did, in fact, drop a resignation letter to Gene Roddenberry, who created Trek. And he was kind of devastated. He didn't want to accept it, and he asked her to please think about it over the weekend. She's fine. And she accidentally just met Martin Luther King Jr., and he turned out to be a very big fan of the show.
um, and the honor that you bring to this role, and people who see you believe you. And I'm like, okay. He said, you can't leave. There are too many of us out here who are affected, and our children are growing up with you. And then I said, okay.
And she decided, okay, I'm going to still be Uhura. Gene, of course, was very happy, and the rest is history as it became a very legendary series. Again, it's easy to say now that science fiction was always very popular. No, it was pretty rare. Again, there just weren't that many, quote, good science fiction shows. There were a few, Lost in Space. Technically, The Twilight Zone is science fiction as well. But in terms of this particular thing, there's really not that much. There's Trek and there's Battlestar Galactica on television. Now, I don't know Battlestar too much, so I want to be careful there. But that was about it in terms of actual television with science fiction and space travel. It really didn't have that much. So Trek really was a pioneer in so many ways, politically, socially, aesthetically. A lot of what it did, of course, influenced Star Wars, it influenced Battlestar Galactica, it influenced the genre as a whole. So there's no doubt it's had a massive impact on science fiction. But now, ironically, a lot of even very faithful Trekkie people have begun to have a lot of doubts and disappointments. A lot of this is located with the J.J. Abrams era. I do want to remind people that Nemesis, when it came out, was pretty universally hated. And I still think it's a really awful film. So even though I did enjoy a lot of the new Trek with Next Generation, Voyager, even DS9, although I've tried to see everything with DS9, but it just hasn't worked for me as well as Voyager or some of the other parts of the Trek universe. But overall, I've loved most of it. Even when it's not that good, I've appreciated what they tried to do. And if when JJ did his version of Trek, at the beginning, most people liked it and were enthusiastic, but as it progressed, it's kind of fractured the fandom that think it's the worst thing in the universe. Fortunately, yeah, I have to report, I do partially agree, because although I did think season one of Picard was actually a lot better than people think, I recognize it had a huge amount of problems, but I thought overall it was okay. It's probably not better than okay, but it wasn't the worst thing. But Picard, the second season, again, has kind of gotten universally bad reviews. And here I do agree, although I'm trying to work through it, it does have some good aspects. It is not very strong. It's a very deep irony that we're losing Uhura, and it does feel like Trek is at its nadir. Should it be left to die? Should we keep going? It's very unclear. And on a final ironic note, apparently Uhura was almost going to be in Picard season 2. Were they going to use Nichelle? That I don't know at this time, but yeah, apparently they had ideas for using Uhura for season 2 of Picard. That would have been definitely interesting. I don't know if it would have been better if we had Nichelle for one last time, but it would definitely be very, very interesting. So, very sad news, kind of all around, because Picard is not well liked at the moment. But I think, again, with Trek, you have to take time to see the good and the bad, both with the original stuff as well as the newer stuff. Sad news, but again, it probably will continue and hopefully will be getting better and improving. But even if it stops tomorrow, it has, no doubt about it, like her, had a massive impact, and the legacy, I think, will be disputed, but no one will argue it definitely has impacted all our lives, whether in subtle or very explicit ways.